Today's experience happened in the year 2004 and was lived by Mrs. Lima, who, after an exhausting workday, began to feel severe headaches and was taken off her duties. At home, she had a sudden illness and a near-death experience. If you're not yet subscribed to our channel, consider subscribing. It's free and helps us a lot. Now here's the story. I am Mrs. Lima, a pedagogue and evangelical pastor. I had a near-death experience in 2004. Due to the intense work rhythm and few hours of rest, my body began to show signs of exhaustion. At work, I sometimes had such severe headaches that I couldn't continue. These headaches led me to see doctors for some tests. I had CT scans, EEGs, and consulted a neurologist because the pain was unbearable to the point where I couldn't get out of bed, eat, or do anything. So I took medical leave and stayed home to rest. The test didn't reveal anything serious, so I took leave and rested at home. I have 3 children, and during this period, they were at home. I stayed resting, taking some painkillers, but nothing serious was detected by the exams. I clearly remember one particular day. I was lying down resting in the bedroom while the kids were watching TV in the living room. I got up to go to the bathroom. My bedroom is close to the living room, and there's a hallway that leads to the bathroom. When I started to walk, I felt a snap in my head, and everything began to darken. I realized I was going to faint. I held on to a piece of furniture in the hallway, trying to sit on the floor so I wouldn't fall all at once because I was sure I was going to black out there. After that, I don't consciously remember my physical body. In a fraction of a second, I was already in another state. My body was there where I had sat, and I was in the corner of the hallway. My kids saw that I had fallen and ran towards me, but at first, they thought I was playing, and my eldest daughter was saying, "Stop, Mom, stop this kind of joke." I had the feeling that my body was falling in slow motion. I was no longer in the body, but I felt it falling slowly and could hear and see everything around me. When I felt completely unconscious and my kids realized it wasn't a joke, they became desperate. And there, in the corner of the hallway, I wanted to go back to my body, but I didn't have the autonomy to do so. So I started thinking, my God, did I die? I saw one of my children run outside to ask the neighbors for help. I could see him outside. I could see my daughter over my body, desperately crying, and also my son Leandro in the kitchen, kneeling, praying that I wouldn't die. I could see and understand everything at the same time. Suddenly, I started to see various people coming in. My daughter was still there, desperate, and I began to feel anguish, saying, "My God, I can't die now and leave my kids." We have always been very close to each other. The anguish was increasing, not because of the sensation itself, as it was a feeling of lightness being out of the body, but because I was contemplating everything and couldn't do anything. Shortly after, I was sucked up to the ceiling of my house, and now I started to see the scene from above, with a panoramic view. I saw one of my daughters still over my body, screaming and hitting my chest, trying to open my eyes and asking me to come back. Once again, I was sure I had died. It was as if every moment I was distancing myself more from my body. I was only worried about my children, but I couldn't do anything. Suddenly, I was sucked outside the house again. I started to see the sun, the brightness of the sky. That was pulling me, taking me further and further, and I began to feel immense peace. The people at home, along with my kids, were getting further away. It was like I was emotionally detaching from that scene little by little. To me, it felt like hours. I could see everything in 360 degrees. I let myself be carried by that moment, and the further I went, the more certain I was that I had died. First, I distanced myself from the neighborhood, then from the city. But I was still in Earth's atmosphere, and I kept rising higher and higher until I finally entered space. It was all very dark. I could see the stars and stayed there for a while, floating, fully aware that I had died, but still alive and conscious of everything that had happened and was happening. I knew something was going to happen, but I didn't know what. I stayed there, contemplating the lights of the stars and waiting. At that moment, I only felt a sense of peace, of being free and full, something I had never experienced. Even after more than 20 years, the memory of this is very vivid, and I get emotional when I tell this story. At that moment, I was no longer attached to Earth, and I started to really like that state. I began to surrender more and more to the experience and felt I was going to a place that seemed familiar, as if I was going home and meeting loved ones I hadn't seen in a long time. Although I was still in space, something among the stars caught my attention, a different light with a yellowish hue, distinct from the others. I focused my attention on that light and was drawn towards it, with no control over my destination, but accepting being taken. Gradually, the light began to take shape, transforming into a door that grew larger as I approached. There were two tall beings beside the door, with a stature different from the people who were inside. I perceived that they were two men, although I couldn't see their faces due to the strong light surrounding them. They wore white robes and gestured to each other as if discussing something about my arrival, which seemed to be expected. As I continued to approach the door, I began to hear familiar voices. Inside me, I knew I recognized those voices. I wanted to hurry my arrival, but I had no control. I could only wait and watch those beings. When they looked at me, I felt an indescribable peace, something beyond the words of our earthly vocabulary. When I was very close to the door, the voices became clearer, and the brightness of the beings stronger, but not blinding. I thought, I'm finally going to find out what's on the other side of the door. Suddenly, I heard a faint voice calling me from a distance. "Mom, come back, Mom." At that moment, I was totally detached from Earth, but I realized that voice was my daughter's. I looked at the beings again and saw them making a hand gesture indicating that I should go back. They repeated the gesture several times. I could contemplate everything at the same time, my daughter's voice, the voices inside, and the beings telling me to go back. My interest in what was behind the door diminished upon recognizing my daughter's voice, and then I wanted to return. Although I wanted to return for my children, I had no control over it, just as my going there was also involuntary. I stayed a few seconds near the door and began to return. The return was traumatic because, unlike the ascent, I fell very quickly, uncontrollably, like free-falling. I re-entered Earth's atmosphere, and suddenly I was back in my body. When I opened my eyes, I gasped for air and thought, "My God, I'm back. I'm back." I returned conscious of everything I had gone through, but although I could hear and see everything around me, I couldn't speak, and my movements were limited. I needed help for a while to perform basic daily tasks. I stayed like that for 3 days, sleeping a lot and needing assistance. After those 3 days, when I fully recovered, I returned with the energy of a child. I no longer needed to take medication. My strength was fully restored. This experience was different from anything I thought before, but now I am certain, which aligns with my previous beliefs, that life does not end here. After death, there is a continuation. We are just passing through, but there is something much greater beyond this. While we are here, we have to give our best, live in the best way, and learn from both good and bad experiences. Thank you very much for listening to the whole story. Like and share the video with those you love. See you next time.